No bottle.
No bottle. The glass and the vineyards in you. That's all you need.
Exactly.
All right, Paula.
All right. We're ready. So welcome, everybody. I see a lot of very familiar faces, which is fantastic. Welcome, Caroline. Welcome, Marie-Luise. And of course, we encourage to discourage any background noise, but we encourage you to put anything into the chat if you have any questions, and then you can ask it at the end of our program. I also want to say a huge thank you to Meeting and Genton. The entire team there has done incredible work on our logo and on our website. We've been really excited. They are doing fantastic, fantastic work. My name, for those who don't know me, is Paula Sidor. I'm sitting here in Bad Honnef, Germany, on the 51st parallel, which is the furthest northern winemaking place along the Rhine River. I'm an American wine writer and a translator, originally from New Hampshire and living here since 2002. I came over to Europe naively thinking that petrol was something that I put in my car. And after my first wine class, which I thought was a bunch of beginners, and it was a bunch of beginners, but it was a bunch of beginners in Koblenz, which meant that they were all winemakers' sons and daughters. And I figured out after about 2 days that I had a lot of catching up to do.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was horrible. And so I started by obviously upping my German, and one of the first German words I learned was also trink. In addition to being the German word for drink, it's also a new publication that's coming later this summer. Editors are Valerie and myself, and it is aiming at nothing less than changing the conversation, the way we speak around German-speaking wines, building bridges between the people making the wines and those who are and the people drinking them. We're going to be featuring a reporting. We're going to be featuring original photography, narrative essays, really trying to get at the heart of German wine, at the heart of the individual regions, one story at a time. And if you'd like to know more, please feel free to drop your email into the chat, and we will make sure to keep you informed as things move along. Valerie, over to you.
My name is Valerie Capuala. I'm a writer based in New York, but focused on the wines of Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Alto Adige, German-speaking wines, if you will. Paula and I were both drawn to wines of this region by many of the same factors, one of which is a desire to demystify these wines for people who, like ourselves, were once complete outsiders to Germany and its wines, and to help them connect with what we see as the electric now in wines of these places. Before we dig in, I'd also like to thank the German Wine Collection, Skurnik Wines, and a local shop here, Kopik Wineworks, who all made it possible for me to have the wines of Schlossgut, Diel, and Sekthaus Raumland in my glass today. So cheers and thank you to them.
All right. Before we introduce our guests today, just a slight bit of background on Sekt. About a century ago, Sekt, which is German for sparkling wine, enjoyed an enviable position on many of the best wine lists. 100 years ago, it was on par in both price and renommee with champagne. Somewhere along the line, that got lost. And when mass production started, people started discovering that they could call the sparkling wine Sekt by importing other grapes and using less expensive methods of production. Obviously, this spiraled downward, ending in Sekt that was being sold for $2.50 a bottle when the Sekt Steuer, or the Sekt tax, was $1.50 a bottle. So you can imagine the quality of the wines that were inside. And then in the 1980s, early 1990s, a change started. German winemakers decided they wanted to take back the idea of Sekt. They wanted to take back the idea of quality sparkling wine. And Marie-Luise, your father, was one of the pioneers leading the way. And they introduced the idea of Winzer Sekt, which could be on par with a grower champagne. The idea is there's a couple of criteria that need to be filled. I'm not going to go into all the details because that's what people always do when it comes to German wine. Needless to say, has to be grapes grown on your own estate. All of the quality markers that you'd be looking for need to be fulfilled. Valerie, over to you.
These guests really represent the vanguard of Winzer Sekt, grower sparkling in Germany. Caroline Diel is a 7th generation winemaker at Schlossgut Diel on the rugged cliffsides of the Nahe and is part of the historic Burg Leyen. Caroline took over the estate from her parents fully in 2017 and has been making the wines her way ever since. The estate makes 3 sparkling wines, including from classified sites, and all in the traditional method. Marie-Luise Raumland comes to us from Sekthaus Raumland in Pforzheim-Dalsheim in Rheinhessen. The house was started by her father, Volker, in 1990 and has become synonymous with Sekt in Germany, quality Sekt. Located in the pastoral hills of southern Rheinhessen, the estate has been leading the Sekt revolution with bottles that remain on their lees from anywhere from 5 to 15 years. Let's start with a fundamental question for both of you. German wines are at their greatest when they are doing what wines of no other nation can do. What for you, Carolina, and then you, Marie-Luise, differentiates German Sekt from sparkling wines of other countries, and to get straight to the point, from champagne?
Well, there are many different factors. I think grape varieties is an important issue. In Germany, we make lots of Riesling sparkling, which is not made in many other places of the world. Also, I think we're in a real beginning of the hype and the beginning with in Germany. We had to learn a lot about how to make sparkling wines because we have a completely different origin in terms of winemaking, and then you have to kind of really change and switch what you're doing in your head because if you want to make sparkling wine, you don't only use a normal still wine to have a second fermentation. You have to work the vineyards differently. You have to pick the grapes at a different moment. And I think in Germany it actually took quite a while to really realize that on a broad surface of growers. I think we have some really, really exciting years to come, and what I mean is now I have to come back to the original question: what makes it different? Obviously, the origin, the varieties, and the climate.
Yeah, I can only add to what Caroline just said. And maybe going back a little bit to what Paula said as well. So thinking of what is actually German sparkling wine, right? Until today, we say that it's called Deutscher Sekt. And Deutscher Sekt represents everything, both from the industrial produced sparkling wines to small grower sparkling wines to Winzer Sekt, what you just said. But still, I would say until last year, there were no real rules or differentiating assessments, let's say, to distinguish what we have here in Germany. So if you say what makes German Sekt special, I would say we then need to raise the question, what is German sparkling wine, right? So when talking about quality sparkling wine, the way we do it, I would also say that we had to learn a lot. That's what Caroline just said. And what my father did actually is that he also looked, first of all, across the borders and looked at what they do in France, what they do in Italy, what they do in Spain, because I believe that they were much more advanced than we were here in Germany, at least for the past 30 to 40 years. And what then happened is that in Germany, we developed some own skills and knowledge and ideas how to produce the best out of what we have here, out of the soil, which can be either super mineralic, like we have here in Rheinhessen, or that can be really special, like at Mosel, where you grow lots of Riesling sparkling wine, and then also the knowledge that we learned here over the past 30 years. I think that makes it special, for example. Yeah.
Okay, so
it's a really good question. It's not easy to answer, I would say.
It's not. It sounds like it's been quite a process and a journey, and we're really at an exciting part of it. From what you both are saying, is that we're at the point where finally you can let go of the side of the pool and really figure out what's working here. Caroline, I mean, you live in a castle, not you personally, but the estate is a 200-year-old estate. Right, you've got these amazing vineyards, you've got this amazing history of wine, and yet in a recent interview on the VDP site, you said you're particularly proud of your Sekts. I think that's fantastic. Why is that? What is it for you that Sekt speaks to that maybe, not that the other wines don't, but what does that fulfill for you?
Well, I have to say I just love bubbles. So. And,
cheers to that.
So it doesn't mean that I don't love still wine, but it means that actually bubbles are something really special for me. I don't know why, but I think I grew up in a quite francophile environment with my family. So we've always had great sparkling wines from the world, mainly champagne, and at my parents' house. So I kind of grew up with it. And so now I'm really proud to be able to make sparkling wines which represent my origin, which represent my vineyards, and which represent myself.
Fantastic. That's beautiful. Thank you.
I have a question for both of you, really. Jamie Good, the wine writer, has written that it seems that the best sect producers are the ones who do just fizz, because it requires a particular way of thinking. Carolina, you alluded to how you have to adjust your thinking even in the vineyards when you know that you're aiming toward the way you farm and the way you grow, when you're aiming toward sect. But Marie-Louise, your family is only making sect. Do you agree with that statement? How would you both respond to that?
Actually, I did not really get the statement.
Jamie Good said, it seems that the best sect producers are the ones who just do fizz because it requires a particular way of thinking.
Yeah, well, let me answer to this. I would say that I agree to it partly. I mean, we are, let's say, the lucky ones who only do this and nothing else. And here I agree that this promises us to really just focus on doing sparkling wine the best way possible, because we always say that the quality starts in the vineyards and not only in the cellar, not in the bottle, once the base is already inside the bottle. What does it mean? It requires special treatment of the vineyards. It requires, for example, a good alcohol management in terms of early harvest, a canopy management, etc. And then once you hit the right moment of harvesting the grapes, then the work starts in the cellar. And here we do different press fractions that you, for example, don't do when producing, let's say, a wine. And then we put it in different tanks, in barriques, and then in the end, the special part starts about creating the right cuvées for your sparkling wines. And of course, if you only produce sparkling wine, you have lots of choices in your cellar to then really work on the details and deciding this barrel fits to that tank and a little bit more of oak here, and then it makes a balance, right? And here I agree, if you if you only do sparkling wine on the side, of course, you don't have all those choices. But it doesn't mean that a winemaker who also does wine doesn't produce a good sparkling wine. So yeah, I believe that the answer is somewhere in between. And nevertheless, we are really lucky to just focus on sparkling wine, because that's, yeah, what we love and where we are good at as well.
And Carolina, before I throw the question back to you, maybe you could just talk a little bit about your training, internships, or education, learning how to make sparkling.
Yeah. In terms of learning about sparkling, I only have actually one real harvest experience and tasting experience in Champagne, and that was at Champagne Guinea. And it's quite a while ago, to be honest. And all the rest of my sparkling education is more by drinking and by talking to other growers and learning more and more details about the vinification processes. And I think the most important for everything is actually to taste and to be open and to talk to people. I mean, you learn much more when you talk to other producers, to colleagues who make wines you adore, you love, you admire. You learn so much more than in any class or in any lecture hall. So yeah, one harvest in Champagne, which was great. I worked at the pressoir in next to Mailly. And Puisieux, it was called, and we actually pressed lots of grapes in two different ways, in the basket press and also in the pneumatic press systems. And that's actually where I really learned the base of the vinification process for bubbles. But now you want my answer for the question. I have to say I'm a little bit in between, but honestly, for me, I think it's a great opportunity to do both, to make still wines and to make sparkling wines. Also, in terms of looking at the moment of harvest, it's quite a luxury situation that we only need to pick a certain amount of our grapes at this early stage. So we don't have as much pressure to actually be right at the right moment, because anyhow we only make maybe 10% of our production for sparkling wines, and at the end when we make our blends, we can always we always sort out some barrels which we don't like 100%, which don't correspond 100% to our taste in terms of base wine for the sparkling, and then we actually put those barrels in our still wines. So that's a really luxury situation as well. Also, in the very beginning of harvest, we're still quite relaxed, because that's when we do pick the sparkling wines. We take all the time for pressing. We take all the time for that vinification process, and that's something I really like about making the different styles of wine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. We are always a bit more pressured because sometimes I remember, I think it was last year, our harvest took us 1.5 weeks because we had to go quick. And of course, if you know that your sugar level has to be between a certain level, you really need to rush. So that's that's the advantage if you do both.
Yeah, definitely. Also, last year, since it was so fast with you, we had 4 of your pickers came to help us afterwards. I don't know if you saw that, but you organized that with your parents.
Sharing resources, it's a good thing.
Do you anticipate challenges with that for this vintage because of the restrictions due to the pandemic? Will there be limitations on your pick crews or anything like that that you'll have to factor in if you have to move fast?
Well, they started opening the rules a little bit, and also the frontiers. So I believe that we will manage well this year. Fingers crossed, because let's hope that there will not be any comeback of the virus. And of course, if you already have some connections to people you know, and they will then ask their families and friends, I believe it will all work out. It had effect on mostly fruit growing farmers in early spring and June. But for us, I believe it will be okay.
And you too, Carolina? The same for you at Schlossgut, Diel?
I think so too. I hope so. Actually, it really, the people from Romania are allowed to come on their normal way again. Before they were allowed to come in by plane, but they changed this rule now. So things are getting a bit more easy again. Luckily.
Okay. Another question for both of you. Bubbles have really never been more popular, democratized by Prosecco and Pet Nat for two different kind of categories of consumers. Why do you think Sekt has had trouble getting the same kind of attention abroad? Is it just because it's all consumed within Germany, or is there something that needs to be communicated that isn't getting out yet?
Yeah, maybe Caroline, I can start answering this, because it follows up on what I said before. I believe it's a problem of communication, first of all, because of the term German Sekt, which can mean everything from cheap and sweet to expensive and really well done and long aging on the lees. And that's the first issue. And then I believe that it took some while to really prove that we are able in Germany to produce high quality sparkling wine. And I mean, we did it for the past 30 years. My dad did it and my parents. But I can really tell from my point of view that within the past 5 years only, there was really, as you say, like a revolution, because people started talking about it. They finally realized there's something coming up that you can actually enjoy. And for example, I talked to an importer in Norway, because we just started working with them a couple of months ago. And he said the interesting part is that right now, since German Sekt is so new and nobody talked about it before, they do not compare it to Prosecco or Cava or Spumante. They start comparing it to champagne. So they really perceive it as something, well, but they know that there's only a small amount of companies producing good quality sparkling wine. So I believe that there's still some way to go. And yeah, it just started.
Yeah, I can totally agree on everything Marie-Luise said. I think that you were asking about the problem also, why it was not recognized, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the major problem of that part is actually that there is such a big amount of really cheap Sekt is being made in Germany, and it's mainly drank in Germany. And as Marie-Luise said, it's only starts. We just started spreading the words outside of our boundaries in terms of high class sparkling wine Sekt. And so we're really at the beginning, and I think I'm really excited for the upcoming years, to be honest.
Well, you're at the beginning. However, you're also on the cusp of climate change, and as you're in a previously marginal climate that's now becoming less so year by year, and you look at champagne houses investing in vineyards in Scandinavia and England, how do you think you will be able to manage that? I know you spoke about canopy management and vineyard work and pressing, but more concretely in terms of the varieties you work with, where your vineyards are located, can you be specific about how you will handle that? Carolina, you want to go first?
So we actually changed, even in the past years. We changed our sites for Pinot Blanc, actually for sparkling wine. So we make the Pinot Blanc base wine for our Cuvée Mont now in a slightly north-facing vineyard. And we also have a completely different way of vineyard management than we practice for our still wines, meaning we have more shoots, we have more leaves, we don't do as much leaf plucking because we don't want the phenols to phenolic structure to be the same as in the still wines, and we really want this freshness which makes you want to have more of the sparkling wines. I think that's a really, really important issue, that the alcohol levels should be in a moderate level.
Yeah, I agree to this. For example, what we always look at, I mean, our vineyards are quite old, but still we do have late ripening varieties that we harvest early. So there we even manage in really warm years like 2018 and 2019 to have grapes that are still high in acidity. Still, we are aware that it's going to change, and that's when what I just said, canopy management, for example, same as Caroline said, you do not remove the leaves early, you rather keep them so that you postpone the ripening a little bit, because you still don't want to have the green characters in the grape, right? They need to be ripe, not too ripe, but still not having the green characters. Maybe that's one thing. And then what we also start thinking of, but it starts now, is that you maybe don't need to always think of the really usual grapes like Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier and Chardonnay. We also now start looking at grape varieties like Sauvignon Gris, that is quite new, that is resistant to many diseases that we have, that is also late ripening, and things like that. I think that the market also adapts to, or the way of working adapts to the climate as well. And now that you mentioned England, it's the best example. I worked in England in a big sparkling winery in 2015. Back then they had 40 hectares. And I remember that they had only harvested 30 hectares, I believe, and the rest was too late because the temperature dropped so much that they had to leave them. And my sister actually worked there 5 years later, and now they have 90 hectares, and everything is ripening well. So even in between 5 years, you could really tell that the weather and the climate is changing, and yeah, we need to be prepared to that. It's coming.
That brings me perfectly to my next question. I mean, whoever thought that we would end up 20 years ago, people would have thought you were crazy if you were talking about Germany having issues with being too ripe and having to leave the leaves on to slow down the ripeness. You know, when I came and I started learning about German wine, the first thing that everybody ends up talking about is different town names, because that's the kind of thing that every German grows up knowing. You know where Bad Kreuznach is in the Nahe, and you know that what more or less that will taste like. It was something that I had to learn, and learn sort of after the fact. And so it's something that continues to be really interesting to me. What sort of identity do you find? We're talking about German Sekt like it's one thing, but it's not any more than German wine is one thing. The difference between southern Rhine-Hessen and the hills of the Nahe are going to be two really, really different regions, different identities. What for each of you do you think of as the identity that you're trying to suggest further, or trying to highlight in the sparkling wines? Caroline, Marie-Luise, whoever wants to go first.
You can go first.
Generous.
Okay, well, let me talk about us. easy for me to say what's our identity. And I would say that for us, it's really important to actually reflect the soil and the climate that we have here in Hessen. We have soils that are rather heavy on limestone and terra fusca. They keep the water really well down in the earth, so the vines really want to also go down. Our vines, for example, are quite old, and that's why our sparkling wines, for example, are rather mineralic, and they have some real elegance and expression, some high acidity, and that's why our identity, for example, is the long aging on the lees. And we love the combination of this freshness and elegance that we have. And I'm not talking here just about Riesling. For us, specifically important are the Burgundy grapes like Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, Chardonnay, and Pinot Blanc. And the combination of this long aging on the lees, like of brioche, of bread, taste and toast. And yeah, for us, I believe that's our identity. And yeah, maybe in addition to that, what we look at a lot is the alcohol level, because what we don't want to do, and what we could see a lot in the past, is that you have sparkling wines that are rather comparable to wine, because they're really full, have full body, are heavy, lots of alcohol, and are good for a glass, but maybe not for a second. And that's why, for example, our sparkling wines are always around 11.5 or 12% of alcohol. So they are really light and, yeah, I'm repeating myself, elegant. Yeah.
It's worth repeating with your wines. Yeah. Absolutely. For anyone who hasn't tried them, you absolutely need to. And Caroline, how about you? What is the Nahe to you specifically in terms of sparkling wines, or your sparkling wines?
Well, the Nahe is really famous for its big variety of different soils. So in Nahe, we don't have much of the limestone, which you have in the Rheinhessen Hügelland. But we have basically everything except for limestone. So we have quartz, we have red soil from Permian times, and we have gravel. And so actually all these different soils and all those different terroirs are making up the identity of Nahe. And so my attempt is, especially with our single vineyard Riesling from Goldloch, to work out this terroir in the most unique way. And honestly, it's really exciting to do this Goldloch lineup when you have the Goldloch Sekt, and then GG, and then we make a Kabinett and a Spätlese, and even an Auslese from Goldloch, and it's quite amazing how this terroir shows in all the different styles, and all different styles have this very specific fruit in common.
Okay, and what fruit is that? What is that common thread? I mean, that would be a fascinating tasting to sort of have Goldloch in all its faces. What for you is that common thread that you say that this for me is Goldloch?
I would say it's mostly yellow fruits, like peach, and with a kind of flinty minerality to it.
Okay, so like a smoky peach almost from your skin.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because just peach could be boring.
You don't do boring. You've never done boring as long as I've known you. So I'm not worried about it.
And I'm totally in the same opinion as Marie-Louise in terms of the freshness and the alcohol level. The Sekt should always be in a really fresh and drinky balance. I mean, you would a good Sekt or my idea of the sect I want to make is that you kind of get addicted. You cannot stop when your glass is finished. You kind of really want to have the next sip, and that's really what I learned in Champagne, to be honest.
Perfect.
That sort of brings us to a question that we've hinted at in terms of the varieties that you're working with, but more in terms of what Winzer Sekt can express about terroir. I mean, we all know that Riesling is such a terroir transparent variety, and it's the signature grape for Germany. So there's an argument to be made that Riesling Sekt is Germany's true sect, but Raumland specializes in classic champagne varieties as well. What do you think? Can Riesling be the grape of choice? I mean, it has some, not to get too technical, but some of its flavor compounds react differently to yeast autolysis than the champagne varieties, and you have to be quite careful with that and keeping those in balance and keeping the varietal expression, but also making this a true traditional method wine.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I mean, we love Burgundy grapes, and that's our focus. But still, we do produce one Riesling sparkling wine. And here, actually, you really have to be careful because, as you know, our focus is the long aging on the lees. And if you have a rather aged Riesling, you might have those petrol notes. And Paula, you mentioned it in the beginning. And that's what we do not want to have in a sparkling wine, because the bubbles, the CO2 is always, and how do you say this? It transports some flavors much more as they actually are. So those petrol notes can be sometimes really dominant in a sparkling wine if you don't watch out in the beginning. So what we do, for example, is that we produce a Riesling rather in the style of a Burgundy sparkling wine. So you could actually recognize it's a Riesling, and we love it as well. It's fresh. It's really high in acidity. It has some nice fruit flavor, and it still stays or tastes young when it's aging. And I believe that, to answer your question, yes, it could be an option to really represent Germany in terms of sparkling wine. But I believe that the majority of the wine growers that focus on sparkling wine right now rather experiment with Burgundy grapes and with grapes that are that adapt better to the brioche flavors when they are aging on the lees.
Yeah. I agree, and most of the well-known German sect and the really highly regarded German sect are blends of Pinot varieties. We also make a Cuvée Mauve blend of Pinot Noir and Pinot Blanc, also, our specialty is the long aging on the lees. So until now, out of the three sparklings we make, the earliest disgorgement we're doing is 5 years after the bottling. So yeah, Riesling. Riesling support that quite well, but I totally agree, and that's why about petrol flavors. Strangely, we have not had so much petrol flavors in our Riesling sect. Also, I think it's very, very important in order not to have too much of the petrol flavors. You have to pay very, very close attention to the canopy management. There again, to leave the leaves to protect the grapes from the direct sunshine is a major factor for petrol notes, petrol flavor development. So I think in terms of viticulture, it's really, really important when you want to make Riesling, sparkling Riesling. Also, talking about the long aging on the lees, I think it's for Riesling, Sekt, it's extremely important to have a long aging. It's even more important than for the Pinot varieties, because for the Pinot varieties you already have a kind of roundness, you already have a kind of brioche flavor. But for the Riesling, if you disgorge a Riesling after the minimum time of I think 9 months is the legal time on the lease. Is that correct, right?
That's correct. Then 9 months is for Winzer Sekt.
After 9 months, the bubbles are just really rough. And if you combine those rough bubbles with the structure of Riesling, I just think it's not what you consider to be a great sparkling wine. So for me, sparkling Riesling and long aging on the lees is a real marriage, a must do for the style I'm looking for, or for the style I assume Riesling bubbles are exciting.
Definitely. I think that leads us right to the next point, which is from the transatlantic perspective. We're seeing a lot of top German growers seem to be in a race for the longest lees contact for their sparkling wines. One of our audience members mentioned the wines of Peter Lauer, Florian Lauer, and these, are 10, 15 years on the lees. I know that Raumland has one that's as long as 15 years on the lees as well, I believe. What's behind this move? Is it this growing recognition of Riesling's suitability to long lees aging? Is it experimentation that we're finally seeing the fruits of? Is it market driven, something else?
That's a good question, because, for example, for us, we started experimenting. I mean, we were right at the beginning, or not we, my parents were right at the beginning 30 years ago, and then you start tasting your sparkling wines after 9 months and you're not satisfied yet, then you wait another 3 months, another 6 months, and at some point we realized that actually for our own flavor, for our own taste, we really prefer long aging on the lees. I'm always a bit careful, because I also see the movement towards long aging on the lees for many wine growers or sparkling wine growers, and people sometimes start to perceive that the long aging on the lees is the secret for a good sparkling wine. I would say that it helps to have a good sparkling wine, but it's not the secret, because the secret starts much earlier, as I said before. And if you do not have a base wine and quite great quality in your vineyards, the long aging on the lees also doesn't support it in the end. So there is a tendency towards this, but I think that we need to look at it, how it evolves. For us, it's really important, but it's only one little part of the whole process.
Yeah, I agree. Anyhow, it is one part of the puzzle for making great sparkling wine. But it's true that it makes the bubble so much more refined and so much more elegant. But if the base wine does not have the quality in the beginning to start with, even though if you leave the Sekt longer on the lees, it won't make it an exceptional Sekt. I agree.
Just one more question to add on from that. The writer and master of wine Anne Crevel has written of German sparkling wine as méthode allemande. Is there something that you see, we've spoken a lot about in the vineyard, but is there something about the process that's distinctively German in your traditional method wines?
Good question. I think it's our hands.
Yeah.
It's the German hands. Well,
Oh, spirit.
what's the German method? You know, I remember when my dad started, he still wrote Méthode Champenoise on his bottles. Today, it's not allowed anymore. To be really honest, no matter whether it's France or Italy or Spain, we all do a traditional bottle fermentation, and we look in the cellar at things like press fragmentation, early harvest, etc. So I believe that we follow a similar philosophy. So I would say, like, what's the méthode allemande? I believe there are a few things that we do differently when it comes to special grape varieties like Riesling, as Caroline said. But yeah, if I'm really honest, we try to follow a similar way.
Totally agree.
Caroline, I had one question for you, and then I want to toss it out to you, Marie-Luise, as well. You and I were talking this morning, Caroline, about the differences between Sekt, Winzer Sekt, Deutscher Sekt. There's a whole lot of different categories, and it's tough for someone who doesn't speak German or who speaks a minimal amount of German to understand what it is that they're going to be getting in a bottle when they pick it up. They pick it up, they look at it, and it's a little daunting. What are a few of the characteristics that people should be looking for in a bottle that will signify that this is a Winzer Sekt, that this is a quality Sekt, that this is something worth opening? Hey, I'm going to be honest.
Yeah. With the words you've been using, the problem is that you can have a Deutscher Sekt, which is great and from a small producer, but you can have a Deutscher Sekt, which is one of the really mass produced,
yeah, mass production.
Mass production, exactly. So a word like Deutscher Sekt does not really mean very much on the label. For ourselves, we decided to put information on the label speaking about aging on the lees, speaking about disgorgement date, and also speaking about the number of bottles disgorged in this charge. With all this kind of information, we want to make it a bit more transparent what you have in the bottle and what how long you could age it, or to give you an idea when is a good moment to drink it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fantastic. So the more information that one can find in the bottle will point you in a direction that says that this has been made with a fair amount of care and concern. How about for you, Marie-Luise? Is there something that you look for on a bottle, or that you think that you could help communicate? We've talked that communication is one of the problems here in people understanding the thing that is German Sekt. So what would you look for?
Yeah, well, I don't want to repeat what Caroline said, but I fully agree to this. In addition to that, I always look at whether it's traditional bottle fermentation. I think that's the base. And then if you know it's traditional, you know that it's probably not mass produced. And the second thing is what we, for example, do is that we write the disgorgement date as well on the back, so that you know the aging on the lees, on how many months or years it was on the lees. And as Caroline said, Deutscher Sekt is not a good term. For example, some people might say you have to look whether it's from a specific region like Rheinhessen-Pfalz. But for example, our estate is in the middle of Rheinhessen and Pfalz. So we have vineyards that we blend from both regions. And that's when you cannot claim one of the regions. And that's why we have to call it Deutscher Sekt. So probably that's not one of the clear factors. And overall, I think there are two initiatives that have started right now that might also help the consumer later on, let's say in 1, 2, 3 years. And the first one is a group of sparkling wine growers that are called Verband der traditionellen Sektmacher, so the German Sekt maker. And they started setting up rules of what's important for high quality German sparkling wine. We already mentioned them. Vineyard management in the cellar, as well as grape varieties and aging on the lees. That's maybe one criteria. And what they want to do is that we would like to have a little label that you put on the bottle in the future, so that you could see that actually that's a traditional Sekt maker in Germany. So you could already feel that it might go in the right direction. And the second initiative is, Caroline can maybe even tell more about it, because we're quite new here, is the VDP Sektstatut, where we also actually decided in June, a couple of weeks ago, on a new set of rules of how to distinguish good Sekt to really good Sekt to prestige Sekt. And they set up like a new pyramid with specific terms to then claim what's good and what's besides those criteria. And this might also help in the future. But all of this, it takes a while until it's established.
As you said, it's the beginning of the journey, in a sense, or at least it's the beginning of this part of the journey. The learning part is mostly behind you at this point. So we at TRINKtalks tend to end each of our episodes with one question. It's the question that I always hated when I came into interviews, because the interviewer would sit there on the other side of the desk and would say, "So, tell me one thing about yourself that I wouldn't otherwise know." And I never knew how to answer it, no matter how many times I tried to prepare. So I'm going to turn around from the other side of this virtual desk, and I'm going to ask each of you, what's one insider secret? What's something that people wouldn't otherwise know that you as two major Sekt producers could confide in us who are listening? What would we not otherwise know about Sekt?
Yeah, that's a really
it is a really mean question. You can bounce it to Caroline if you want. Who wants to take it? Caroline, how about you?
Well, for me, the secret is just drinking the best bubbles you can find, and enjoying every moment. It's a hidden secret, maybe, or not a hidden secret. I don't know.
It's an important aspect. It really gets lost sometimes.
We just had our vintage presentation last weekend, and we actually established this rule for the team. When we start the day, we put on Under Pressure from Queen, and when you hear the sound, everybody comes to the kitchen and we open a Magnum of Sekt. And we do that at every moment during the day when we have a little bit of time and not too many customers. So for me, really, the secret is enjoying great bubbles with great people. And if that's with the team, or if that's with friends, or with colleagues, it's for me, that's the most important.
Perfect. That's perfect. Thank you. How about you? Right?
I'm thinking a lot about the question. An insight that you didn't know, an insight that we didn't know until recently. So you know that French people love to drink French and eat French. And of course, that's one of the export markets that is really, really difficult for us. We do have a really small importer in France. And I remember a couple of years ago, there was a journalist at our estate, and she asked, where do you actually ship your sparkling wines to? And we said, for example, to France a little bit. And then she started contacting our importer in France and started asking him, where do you sell Raumland to? Where do you sell German Sekt to? And he answered that one of the clients is actually the Palace of Élysée, Élysée Palace, which made us really like super surprised, because there you can see, oh, okay, they also like to taste other stuff. So this made us really proud, and is maybe a little insight and secret that not many people know.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I think we have just a moment or two to throw out some of the questions that have been popping up in the chat. And I'll pose one or two of those, and then if anybody has an additional question that's just occurred to them, feel free to unmute yourself and ask our guests directly. Jerome is saying that Germans gobble up about a quarter of the world's production of sparkling wines. Any idea why Germans are so keen on bubbles? Is it just about the availability of cheap sparkling, as we've discussed, or are there other reasons, historical perhaps?
Well, I think one of the reasons is actually that the price per bottle is as low as in no other country in the world. The Germans they drank 4 liters of sparkling wine per head, per capita within the past years. I think it's declining slightly, but what you can see that is they start drinking more quality sparkling wines and less of the cheaper ones. So I believe that's maybe one aspect, yes.
Okay, good. And there was another question about your single vineyard bottlings. Carolina, I know that you do that. How about you, Marie-Luise? Does Sekthaus Raumland do single vineyards as well?
Yeah, we do it a lot actually, but we do not communicate it, which we will change soon as well. For example, our most important sparkling wine is our Triumvirat, which is a blend of Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Chardonnay, on the lease for more than 100 months, and always oak involved. And this is grown on our most important vineyard location, which is called Dalsheimer Bürge, and we can really tell that this has the most expression because it's really mineralic. It's always high in acidity, and we would like to start communicating this more. But still, and Caroline and I and lots of other winemakers, we had this discussion: is that what's actually a good sparkling vineyard? It's not necessarily the one that is really, really well for normal wine. So it takes a while to figure out, because when we harvest a single vineyard today or next year, it takes 3, 4, 5 years to then realize, is it a good one or not? So for us, for example, it took 30 years to realize that our Dalsheimer Bürge is one of the most expressive ones. So to answer the question, yes, we will do it more and more, and we already do it, but don't communicate it.
Okay, excellent. And Carolina, you have the Gold Loch. Which other single vineyards do you produce?
As a really declared single vineyard Sekt, we only make the Gold Loch. Our Riesling Reserve is often from a single vineyard as well, but we don't communicate that because we also kind of want the liberty to take some more components depending on the vintage for that blend.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and in terms of the vineyard sides, the quality of the vineyard side for still wine and for sparkling wine, that's true. That's a issue, and here you see a very clear cutting, or division in Germany. The northern wine growing regions actually are able to use their traditional große Lage for sparkling wine, because it's still kind of cool enough to make really exciting sparkling wines there. But the more south you get, the more difficult it gets to make traditional sparkling wines in the classified Große Lager, for example. Yeah.
Thank you. We have just 1 minute if anyone wants to jump in with a last question. Otherwise,
we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much, Marie-Luise and Caroline, for joining us here tonight, for your honesty and especially your energy, your reminder that we need to remember to enjoy what it is that we're bottling. All of the technical information aside, it's about coming together, and that especially today is even harder. So thank you so much for taking the time out of you guys' day and your evenings to come out and join us, and to all of our viewers as well for taking the time on your various time zones, whether it's during the working day or whether it's your evening. Thank you for coming. Without that, we'd just be voices on a screen. So it's wonderful to see all of your faces. This episode, if other people have missed it or other people are interested in participating, will be available on our YouTube channel in the coming days. Usually it takes us about 1 or 2 days to get it up and ready to go. And the next episode, if you're interested in tuning in, will air live on July 20th at 10 p.m. at 8 p.m. London time, 9 p.m. Berlin time, and 3 p.m. Boston time. While everyone talks about Germany, in Germany about Riesling, there's a lot more than just white wine, and that's important to remember. So we will be taking a deep dive into Germany's Red Diva, Spätburgunder, or Pinot Noir, with 2 of Germany's top young talents in Pinot Noir. That's the Julia Bertram and Benedikt Baltus. You can log in directly from our website as you did today. And we hope you'll tune in and really, really look forward to seeing you then. Take care and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was wonderful seeing you guys. Ciao.
You too. Thanks.